Oversight Committee meeting number 19. It is the 21st of March. We are into spring already, if you can believe it. Yay for March, yay for spring. Excellent. Appreciate your presence and being here with us tonight. We're going to cover quite a bit of material. Want to encourage everyone, if you have not already stopped at the first couple of tables, sign in so we can capture your information. And you can get a packet of what we are going over. I'm Dr. Stephen Holt. I'm the facilitator of our work tonight and the facilitator for the Northeast Community Development Initiatives Oversight Committee. Welcome. This is a meeting that is open to the public. It is not a public meeting. And what that means is that you have the opportunity to hear, watch, listen, sit, be flies on the wall, as it were, with the work that is going on with the Community Development Initiatives Oversight Committee. We will follow along the agenda, and there will be opportunity for public comment. We ask that your public comment be directed around the work, the scope, the agenda items that are identified. That is always helpful. If there are other things that concern you that you would like to speak about or speak to someone who is a part of Prosper Portland who could address your concerns, I'm going to ask Prosper Portland staff to identify themselves by raising your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. Prosper Portland people that are with us tonight so far. Excellent. So we will begin in, I guess right now, by taking roll call. So let's take roll. Of course, I'm here.
Kimberly.
You need a microphone. He's turned it off.
Kimberly Moreland, Project Manager.
Dorsey Johnson.
Leisha Posey.
Maurice Drumming.
Gwen Thompson.
Jennifer Huang.
And on the phone we have is that microphone on? Alicia, could you look and see if that microphone's on for me? All right. Karen, are you there on the phone? Doesn't sound like she tapped in. And we have joining us
Tunisha Smith.
Hey. Well, welcome everybody. I will now turn it over to our co-chair, Gwen Thompson, to address minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Just prior to reading and reflecting upon our minutes from last meeting, we have a special gift for acknowledgement, appreciation, gratitude, and just overall warm feelings for our outgoing co-chairs, Leisha Posey and Hoppin. Let's give them a round of applause.
Like literally something?
Like literally.
I'll put it up here.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Oh, wow. Wow.
Oh, there's a box.
Thank you.
Good thing I'm not.
So is this mine, or do I have to share with Holly?
That is yours. And again, just want to thank you for your service and being our first co-chairs and all the work that you guys did to help us get to this point. It was a lot of hard work and great effort. And that is yours, and we have one for Hobbin as well. You're welcome.
Very welcome. So if you wouldn't mind, everyone, please take a look at your minutes. If you would like, I'm more than happy to just bring to your attention a couple of the major things that happened in our meeting last week, if that would be helpful for anyone. Otherwise, please just take a couple of minutes and read it over. Is that okay? Wonderful, we'll do that. All right. So just prior to approving the minutes, would anyone like to reflect on anything in the minutes that you read? Or any concerns or questions, clarifications needed? Okay, then I would like to draw to your attention at least one thing that I thought we should maybe reflect upon, which is that Court Morse, who's the equity manager at Prosper Portland, she introduced herself to the Oversight Committee and made herself available to all of us for coffee and conversations. So that is a resource that I wanted to make sure that we all remembered that we had to our avail. And with that, would anyone like to motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Excellent. Minutes approved.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is our redevelopment impact study, and I'm going to invite the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to come to the table, and with a few caveats tonight to kind of set up what we're going to do. This information is what would we call full of content. And so because of that, these wonderful gentlemen who are presenting are going to pause after each slide and give opportunity for the Oversight Committee to weigh in with questions, to gain some clarity and some understanding. So, gentlemen, if you will introduce yourselves, and you have the floor.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I'm Tom Armstrong with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm a supervising planner there and lead our housing and economic policy team. And with me are two other staff members that helped put together this memo.
I'm Nick Coble. I'm also on Tom's team. I'm an associate economic planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And for this memo, I mostly served in a technical capacity.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyler Bump. I'm a senior economic planner at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Before we get into this specifically, I want to give a big thanks to both Leisha and Maurice, as they've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months reviewing this information with us and really asking us tough follow-up questions and sort of really being thorough and making sure that we're representing this in the best way that reflects the experiences and the realities of the community. And so I just want to say a big thank you to them before we get moving here. Also, before we get moving, it's probably worthwhile to talk about why we're doing this and why we specifically are doing this. This is similar work, this is very loud, similar work to other research and other analysis that we provide different groups, community organizations, and business districts throughout the city of Portland. John Washington here, we've worked with the North-Northeast Business Association a lot in the past, providing similar information. Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative areas, Kenton Business Association, St. John's Boosters, St. John's Main Street. So this information isn't new to us, and presenting it in a way that's helpful for the community is something that I think we're trying to develop over time and making sure that we're a resource for folks as they're looking to have questions answered. And so that's a little bit of why we stepped into this role. And Leisha and Maurice had asked us to do it as well, so here we are.
I think if you pull out the memo, from our December 5th memo, we're going to walk through that, and the graphics that show up on the screen are also in this memo, and so it might be easier for you to see and follow along.
As a baseline for this information, one of the places that we started in reference for this data and research that we did was actually a document that was part of the original Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal planning work that was published in 2001. It was called the Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area Base Data and Trends Report, and it was published in September of 2001. It's a big existing conditions document that has a whole lot of demographic information about businesses, a sort of urban form overview and summary of the Interstate Corridor area at that point in time. And I think the intent of that was to provide a baseline for the decisions and the policies and the programs that were talked about at that point in time, and to evaluate against those in the future. So we've used that as the baseline of where we are today, comparing to what was done in that work at the beginning in 2001. This chart that we have on the slide here is also...
It's on phone,
Oh, okay. The chart that we have that's available is, or up on the slide here, is also available on page 2 in the memo. And we just want to start off a little bit talking about some of the questions that the Oversight Committee and Maurice and Leisha and the subcommittee specifically asked us. And we want to present an idea or an overview of the data that's available, the questions that we were able to answer, and also provide some context for some of the questions that we weren't able to answer and why we couldn't answer those questions. So all of the sort of green bars, we've got all of these different variables or different pieces of information that we were asked to provide for these different time periods starting in 1990 through 2000 and 2010, or sorry, 2016. So all of the green color is information that's easily available that we can sort of pull and present in a way that's simple and digestible to look at. The colors that are the yellow color are things that we have also has taken a little bit more work, but we've sort of combined some things to paint a picture of some of these questions that were asked. The orange ones are things that are not necessarily available with a data set that we can access. They're things that are possible to get with further, if it was a recommendation of this committee or further work, we could look into those things a little bit more. And then the red bars, and there's two specifically that I want to address that are really difficult to answer. And we get asked these questions a lot, no matter where we are, and they're really important questions. And I don't know that we as a city, both the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and Prosper, have really gotten to a place of how we answer these questions effectively for communities. And specifically, that's business ownership characteristics by race. So what's the race and ethnicity of business owners? There's not great information out there. There's not a data source that we can go to access that information. And also property ownership by race. So one of the questions was, that were asked was how long and what type of racial and ethnic characteristics do property owners have in the Interstate Corridor URA? Those are things that are just not available. It's information that could be collected if we were to do door-to-door, business outreach and do some surveys and communications with folks. But it's pretty time intensive to be able to collect that information. So those are the two big questions or the two big questions that folks that Leisha and Maurice had asked of us that just aren't available given our timeline on this. So before I move on, any questions on what we were asked, what we were able to provide, any issues there? We're good? Okay. Two static maps here too, if we wanted to just go back to 2000 and then look at 2017. So this is the last year that we have full complete data where broadly there's limited affordability with the exception of some areas in East Portland and also some areas on the peninsula and St. John's as well that are in the Interstate Corridor URA. There is some level of affordability that still exists in some parts of North Portland. In 2017, right. Okay, so the next chart here is on page 4 that we'll be talking from. And this is where we really get into the changes in housing price specific to the Interstate Corridor URA. So the Interstate Corridor URA are the bar charts on the line charts on the right side, and the City of Portland are on the left. Since 2000 in the Interstate Corridor URA, home prices have doubled. So not just getting a little bit more expensive, have doubled since 2000. Single-family home prices in the Interstate Corridor URA were around $200,000 in 2000, and at that point in time, it was significantly lower than the citywide average. In 2017, it's climbed up. The average price for a single-family house in the Interstate Corridor URA is approximately $500,000, which is higher than the citywide average now. The citywide average is about $425,000. So,
is this with the influx of other states and California and everybody coming in?
a big part of it has to do with our job growth and the types of jobs that we're growing and who's coming in to fill those jobs. The wages after the recession have been predominant jobs that we've grown in the city have been predominantly high-wage jobs, and the folks that are accessing those jobs are sometimes Portlanders that are here, but oftentimes are also people that move here to take those jobs as well.
And also based on education, right?
And education, right? So it's most of these that we're looking at are a bachelor's degree, a 4-year bachelor's degree or more for most of these higher wage jobs. There are still some neighborhoods in the Interstate Corridor URA that are, I want to say in big quotes, relatively affordable. They're not as expensive as $500,000, but closer to the citywide average of about $400,000 or $425,000. All of those neighborhoods are north of Rosa Parks. Those neighborhoods include neighborhoods like Piedmont, Arbor Lodge, Kenton, Portsmouth, St. John's, and Woodlawn. So a lot of the discussion here is around the historic Albina community. The neighborhoods within close in inner north northeast are above that 500,000 point for the most part. In this same period since 2000, since the year 2000, there have been 11,000 new residential units that have been built in the Interstate Corridor URA. That represents 16% of all new development. All new housing units in the city of Portland since 2000 have been built in the Interstate Corridor URA. So a massive amount of new housing has been built. Some of the increase in prices reflect newer housing too. Newer housing is generally more expensive, and so the prices go up sometimes when you see new housing, and then you can see more pressures on the existing housing stock. That's when we start to see the sort of churn of flipping and renovations and that sort of thing that drives up the prices in our neighborhoods as well.
The revenue come internally or externally?
For
You want to use the mic?
To fund it, was the funding that developed the 11,000 whatever, was that internal funding or external?
so some of them, it's hard to say how many are local developers or national or international developers. A lot of the building that has been built is actually local developers. Where that money comes from could be institutional funders from big banks. It could be pension funds. It comes from a variety of sources.
Wasn't there a huge amount of funding that went towards California?
There's a lot of funding from development that has come from the California Public Employee Retirement System. So the CalPERS Institutional Investment Fund does a lot of investing in real estate up and down the West Coast. So are there any other questions on this slide before we move on?
I have so many more questions, but I'm be quiet.
So if you have more detailed questions, we have our contact information is available. I'll leave some cards out too, and feel free to give us a call or send us an email, and we'll.
I got Miss Kimberly.
Okay. Okay. So the next slide that I'm looking at here is on page 5, and this is when we start to get into the changes in jobs, job growth, and new business growth. And when we say, I'm going to reference firms, new firms, firm growth, what I mean when I say new firms is new businesses. So if I say firm growth, I mean growth in businesses in the Interstate Corridor URA. There have been significant increases, like in housing, significant increases in businesses that have started or moved into the Interstate Corridor URA between 2002. So 2002 was our base year for jobs because that's the best year that we have information for. So between 2002 and 2016, over 1,100 new businesses have moved into the corridor or started in that period of time. That's a 92% increase in the amount of businesses that were in the corridor in 2002. So a huge amount of new businesses have moved into the corridor. Some of that is into new buildings. There's new commercial buildings that have been built. There's some new businesses in there. There's a lot of vacant buildings that have been commercial buildings that have been renovated with new businesses. Bigger buildings split into smaller spaces. And there's also a large amount of home-based businesses that exist throughout the Interstate Corridor URA as well. So there's a lot of variety in where these businesses have started or grown here. All business categories, when we look at business categories, we're talking about manufacturing or distribution or retail and restaurant services. All business categories that we looked at saw growth in the Interstate Corridor in this period of time. There are a few categories that saw the biggest increases. The biggest increases for new firms, new businesses, were restaurants, bars, professional and labor organizations. Interesting, there's been a move of union and labor offices that have moved to the Interstate Corridor URA over the last 15 years or so. And then also what we call personal services. And personal services include things like barbershops, salons, home care workers. There's been a big increase in those types of businesses as well. Now moving on to the job growth side of things, which is what this chart on page 5 references. Just like the strong new business creation, there was extremely strong job growth in the Interstate Corridor in the same 2002 to 2006 time period. There were about 13,000 new jobs that were added to the area, to the Interstate Corridor URA in between 2002 and 2016. And that brings the total employment, the total jobs in the Interstate Corridor URA to about 33,000 jobs. So that's a huge amount of growth, significantly more than what the city of Portland has seen as a whole in terms of job growth. And it's been all over the place. It's in medical institutions, it's in education institutions, it's in retail sales and services, it's in new office uses that are happening throughout the area as well. So those new jobs are happening all over the place, from the historic Albina community all the way up into St. John's and to Kenton as well. So that job growth is happening everywhere. Anything on the job business growth before I move on?
Well, it would be lovely to see who benefited from those jobs in terms of racial groups as well.
Next slides.
That's a great segue into our next slide here.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt something? No.
On the paragraph where you talk about the large increase in new businesses that started to move into the interstate corridor, and it says 1,200 were there in 2002, and in 2016 there were 2,300. Does that number account for businesses that left during that time too?
Yeah, it's a net change. So we're just comparing the total amount of businesses in 2002 compared to the total amount of businesses in 2016. So there are some businesses that had left, and there's some businesses that had either started or moved to the area in the same period of time.
Thank you.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on what you said regarding the professional neighborhood organizations and the unions, so that we can all have a clear idea of like what those might look like and
Where they maybe are?
who a few of them are?
Yeah, I mean, you can, so on Lombard, interestingly, there's a large concentration of union offices in between Greeley and Interstate. I can think of about 5 union offices that are there. And you'd never know it because they look like office buildings and there's not big signs outside. The Brandon building, specifically on Lombard, was and still has a significant amount of labor and union organizations that have their offices in them. And so they're sort of all over the place, but there is a really interesting concentration of labor and union organizations that are on Lombard in between Greeley and Interstate.
Thank you.
Sure. So this next series of charts is on page 6, if you'd like to follow along on page 6. What we're looking at on the slide here is a little bit of a simplified version of what's on page 6. So we're in the slide looking specifically at only the black and white households, or black and white workers, and this to get to the racial disparity part. Oh, sorry.
The bottom of 5.
Page 5, bottom of page 5, yeah, not page 6.
Bottom of page 5.
While firm growth and employment growth have been very strong for the Interstate Corridor URA, the benefits of this job growth have not been equitably distributed to folks throughout the community in that period of time. Households of color in the corridor earn 60% of the median income that white households earn in the Interstate Corridor. So for the median household income of a white household, households of color earn 60% of that. So there has been some job growth and some folks have benefited, but generally in terms of income and wealth generation, those benefits have not been equally distributed and have not benefited everybody equally. Incomes for white households between 2000 and 2016 rose 5 times faster than for households of color in that same period of time in the Interstate Corridor. So some of that has to do with opportunities for white households and the sort of education background, the existing white population in 2000. A lot of it also has to do with the folks that have moved in that period of time as well. So there's this growth in higher income white households that have that 4,400 new white households that moved into the corridor. A lot of those households are seemingly significantly wealthier and have much higher incomes than the households of color that live in the corridor as well.
And thanks for clarifying it. I like that chart a little better because it's a little easier to see, but I think it's interesting that you see such a massive job growth and yet you see the incomes, especially for African Americans within the city, actually going down. And so it's not obviously benefiting everybody.
Right. Okay. And the next slide that we have up here references a table that's on page 7. The table on page 7 has a lot of information and a lot of numbers on it. So we've simplified that to try to help communicate it in a better, easily, more digestible way. What we're looking at here, one of the questions that Maurice specifically asked us as we were going through this process was, how long have folks in the community owned their properties? And is there differences between different parts of the Interstate Corridor URA than other parts? And there are, and we'll go over some of those findings here with you right now. 25%, and we look in this chart that's over here, and again, this presentation will be available through the minutes and through Prosper staff. But what we're looking at in this chart is the green bars are industrial properties, the yellow bars are single-family properties, and the blue bars are commercial properties. And 25% of commercial properties in the Interstate Corridor URA have been owned for 20 years or longer, which is a significant portion of all commercial properties that in the Interstate Corridor that have been owned for a very long time. That rate of 25%, we looked at other parts of town, other commercial corridors throughout the city to compare that to, is pretty similar to other commercial corridors in inner southeast, for example, or other parts of Portland and northeast. So it's pretty consistent with what's happening across the city. However, there are higher shares of long-term commercial property owners in a few distinct commercial nodes or commercial segments, business districts throughout north and northeast Portland. There are higher shares of long-term commercial property ownership in Kenton, on Lombard, in between Albina and Chautauqua. So a little bit between where the Kenton neighborhood boundary ends on Lombard and Albina at the east end of Lombard for the district. Also on Killingsworth, so the whole stretch of Killingsworth in between MLK and Greeley also has a high share of longtime commercial property owners. And MLK south of Alberta also has a higher share of commercial property owners that have owned their properties for a very long time as well. So if programmatically this committee was interested in supporting longtime property owners, the highest share of longtime property owners are in those areas that I just mentioned: Kenton, Lombard, from Albina to Chautauqua, Killingsworth, and MLK south of Alberta.
That would be me.
1 in 5 homeowners have lived in their homes in the Interstate Corridor for 20 years or longer. This was kind of a surprising number for me. Like 20% is pretty significant of folks that have been here for 20 years or longer. Parts of the Interstate Corridor URA south of Rosa Parks, this is where it gets a little bit different than the commercial ownership, actually have longer term property ownership for single family residential than the parts north of Rosa Parks. So anybody that's in the historic Albina community here has actually most likely been here for a much longer period of time than households or folks that are north of Rosa Parks or other parts of the peninsula and North Portland throughout the URA as well. That was also an interesting finding because it's a little bit inverse of the commercial property ownership as well. Okay, and now we're going to get really into the
Question, Tyler.
weeds. Yes, before we move on.
With the numbers for the commercial corridors, do we know if those numbers represent few property owners that own in different areas throughout the city? Is it small property owner, like small spaces, or, it's just like some big person that has multiple pieces of property throughout the city?
I don't know that we know that for sure. It's something that we could look into. If we wanted to focus on those areas that have longtime commercial property owners, we could focus in on those areas and take a look at that in more detail, if that's something that's interesting. It would be harder to do for the whole Interstate Corridor URA, but if we wanted to focus on those smaller areas, we could. So one of the questions that Maurice was actually really pushing us on again was where folks that live in the Interstate Corridor URA work. And this gives us a good idea of where they work and what sort of jobs folks work in, and likely what their incomes are in those jobs as well. So we've looked at this a few different ways. The selection area that we've chosen for these, we actually looked at this inner north. It's kind of hard to see on this slide here, but they're starting on page 9 in the packet is where the maps are. So on page 9 specifically, there's a red outlined area of our selection area. So what we're showing here on the map is anyone that lives in the red outlined area, the map that we're showing here is where they work. So the concentrations, anything that's red or orange has a higher concentration of where people work. Anything that's blue has a lower concentration, but folks are working throughout parts of Portland and parts of the region. This is going crazy a little bit. So in that inner northeast sub area that you can see on page 9, that red outlined area, this map shows where low to middle income residents work. And for the most part, people are generally working in close proximity to where they live, mostly within about 3 miles. There's a lot of employment in the central city. There's a significant portion of folks that work at the Lloyd Center. And then also on Alberta, so this in MLK and Alberta, this is real interesting, that there's a lot of people, low income and middle income folks in the inner northeast area here that are working on MLK, that are working on Mississippi, that are working on Williams and Alberta, mostly in retail or service jobs, but people are generally working pretty closely to where they live for low and middle income workers here. We also see a few concentrations of where people work at regional malls and regional shopping centers as well. And then there's a little bit of concentration happening around medical institutions, so hospitals throughout the region as well. I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. So this next map, let's see where this one is.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I know we talked about it a little bit, but as it relates to transit lines, whether it's good bus lines or max lines, and how that actually interplays with some of this?
Yeah, so the low middle income workers where they work are extremely well served. I mean, you've got by the bus lines, frequent service bus lines for sure, because you've got the 75, the 35, the 4, the 44, the 6, all of these buses that really serve inner northeast very well. So folks have within, even if you have to transfer, but within one transfer, you're probably within 30 minutes of or a lot of folks are within 30 minutes of their jobs on transit that are in that low and middle income category as well. It gets a lot harder when you get further away. So if you get out towards east of 122nd, for example, or if you get out to Clackamas County or further on the west side, it's very, very hard to get there by transit.
Thank you.
Any question from the phone? Karen? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the red and orange colors show a higher concentration of residents that work in those locations. That's where they work. That's where they work, yeah, that's where residents work. So the red area is the red outlined area. Anything in there is where folks live. And then the colors that are on the map represent concentrations of where people that live in those areas work. And so that's what's showing up there. And then so this next slide that we're looking at here is that same selection area, but for moderate to high income households for the same selection area, also very driven by the central city. The central city is the region in the state's highest concentration of jobs, so it's going to show up pretty much every time we select something. But there's a lot of interesting things that's happening. Providence starts to show up. This is where the medical institutions and the sort of nursing jobs and medical support jobs really start to show up for middle income workers. Providence shows up. Nike starts to show up significantly. Intel starts to show up a little bit more. OHSU really starts to show up as well. There's a lot of moderate income jobs that are at OHSU. So we start to see more of these middle income and really big job campuses throughout the region once you get to the moderate income categories. In the packet here, in the memo, we've got some different, and I don't think we have them all in here because we wanted to really talk specifically about the northeast area and then the historic albino community in a second. But in the memo, there's some different areas that have very different patterns. And so there's one that to me is really interesting, which is the peninsula, Kenton through St. John's, essentially. And that map looks very, very different than an inner northeast map. It is on page, we didn't make a map of it, but it is on page 11. Especially when you look at over time, you start to see some more of the industrial district showing up, Swan Island showing up, more jobs in the Columbia corridor because they're closer to where folks live on the peninsula and other parts of North Portland as well. But if you're interested in this stuff, there's a lot of interesting maps that we have in here. Oh, and I guess that's it. In the end of this, if you send this presentation out, we also have a lot more of these maps if you're interested in these. There's just a lot of different things that we can look at for where people live and where they work and their different income levels as well. So this generally covers most of the questions that was asked by the subcommittee and refinement questions as we met over time. And again, big thanks to Maurice and Leisha on their work on this. And then I guess if we have any questions or clarifications before we move on.
Questions, committee, weigh in. Jennifer.
Just turn it on. Hello? At the very front, you mentioned if identified as a priority, the next phase of work would be to collect primary data on business ownership, demographics, and qualitative information from businesses. Do you know how much of an investment that would take and how long that data gathering would be? Is that part of what you were saying would be going door to door and it would take an exhaustive amount of time? Or?
Yeah, it would be going door to door, and we certainly wouldn't be able to get 100% sample, but it would take a pretty significant amount of time to go door to door and talk to folks. It's work that we've done before. I've done that personally in Cully. I've done it in parts of East Portland before as well. So it's possible. It's just the resources and the time that it would take to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the only way to get that information, really.
Right. Okay.
I also appreciate the work of Leisha and Maurice in pushing for this data. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how does this, if it does, help the city, and how does it inform your own work?
Well, I think, again, the starkness of the data and the declines, especially in the African American community, it really, for some people, they hear about the experiences, and other people, the numbers resonate. And, especially the graph on page 3 of just showing the numbers of black households and the decline there really puts all these numbers into a picture that people can really, that sort of, oftentimes we hear in these community conversations about validating or verifying the lived experience, and stuff like this really validates that, and for certain policymakers, that's what it takes, is to be able to see this in stark numbers. And I think that's, especially, with the ability to look back at the report that was prepared in 2001 and bring that up to date to show, here's what's actually gone on inside the urban renewal area, is helpful. I think it confirms the experience and sort of what we know from conventional wisdom and here in the community. Where we go from here, that really becomes your charge in terms of and where your priorities are. But I do think you can take that 2001 report, you can take this report, and it becomes that sort of validation for some people of that experience.
I have a question. At what point do you think that we'll be able to quantify the impact of the preference policy or the North-North CDI, and in terms of its impact on bringing people back to the community or increasing the stock of affordable housing? Yeah. And is there any way of having some early indications of whether these policies are working?
Well, yesterday I read, and I don't even remember where I read it, but the the Housing Committee just released an update of the preference policy, and it's really pointedly critical of government investment in the past and what's happened so far with the preference policy, but really looking forwards to the future. So I think their updates that they do for the preference policy and the Northeast housing strategy over time, because I think they do those annual updates, is really interesting. And when I read that, it just came out last week. It was a really good document, and I think tracking that over time is important. I think the hardest thing, the last time that we looked at information like this was in 2001. And so we certainly have to do it more frequently than that to make sure that we're tracking it and holding ourselves, and really the community holding us to our word on what we're going to do. The preference policy, I think, looking at the housing trends and the homeownership and rental rates for the Black and African American households in the community, to me that says we should absolutely be continuing to support that and support it in a higher capacity than we already are. What does that mean for business growth and business development? I think is the CDI's charge, given the remaining resources in the URA, and how do you allocate those resources to the folks that we can really move the needle the best. The last oversight meeting, when the Northeast Business Association is doing the outreach work, I think even just supporting the existing organizations to do the work is a big step also. To the outreach part of us going door to door, we could do that, but also there's folks in the community that can do that too. And how do you build that capacity and build that skill set for folks in the community to really reach everybody? I think, to me, at the program level and like on the ground, those are the things that can help us move forward. But they're little incremental things, that we need to do bigger things, but we also have to do the little things.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Jennifer.
I guess I just have a general comment and maybe a question to pose to the committee members, but I'm wondering if we can use this document to, it's good the validation is good and it shows how important the work is, but also it shows that it looks like times are good except for the African American community specifically. So it kind of highlights the flaw in grouping minorities together, which is kind of unfortunately how the criteria is structured in which we review applications. And so I'm wondering if, because the data is pointing so specifically to this one group, that's so loud, if we can use it to use this data to restructure our
Jennifer,
criteria.
I hate to interrupt you. They're turning it up to hear you. So if you pull it closer, they'll pull it down. I know that you don't like, there we go. Excellent. Thank you.
So wonder if we can use this data to restructure our criteria and then relook at how we analyze our applicants and perhaps the constructs in which we provide grants and loans. And then also, I wonder if we can project at all with this data, given the influx of people and then given the declining rate of homeownership and businesses, to help us set our goalposts. Are we even going to make a difference if we only add this much a year or this much a year? Can this be used to define perhaps what we need to attain in order to actually make a difference? That's for you guys.
One of the things I'll do is I'd like to thank you guys for doing this. And I know I was pushing on doing something like this early on. I think it's hard for us to make decisions without the data. So by you guys providing this, it allows us to make better decisions. I think what it also shows is that what we've been doing in the past has just been baby steps. And the problem is that there's more and more people losing their homes. There are more and more people getting displaced because we've been doing these baby steps. And so this gives us a platform to actually look at trying to do something real and concrete, to have some positive movement instead of taking these little steps one by a time. So I'd like, again, thank you guys, because this validates what we all knew was happening, but it also gives us the ability to then make some more aggressive strategies to move the ball forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it. Any closing comment before you?
No, I think you guys have grasped it, and it's a big challenge ahead to figure out how to use these resources to really sort of begin to move this needle. And how to be effective at it, so.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I've already received some names and some public testimony cards here, and it is that moment and that time for public testimony. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 10 minutes, 5 names, which equates to 2 minutes per person, doesn't it? And that's normally what we give. So I'm going to call you, I'm going to ask you to be sensitive to the 2-minute moment. And if we go beyond that, then we'll have to shut you down. Yes, sir.
How would I participate with this? Do I have to go through the same?
Yeah, we need a card, yeah. Yeah, if you want to have a public comment moment, absolutely. Thank you. So, Grant. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You have 2 minutes. Please begin.
All right, thank you. Didn't prepare anything. Good thing I didn't, because I only got 2 minutes. But I just wanted to say that as a minority business owner, there's a lot of challenges out there in the community to overcome still, and any assistance we can get along the way to one, give me an opportunity to contribute something back to the community through this program, and 2, to help grow my business. Would be greatly appreciated. So I just hope that this committee can help that to happen. So
Thank you, sir.
I didn't really have anything else unless someone had a question for me.
Where and what is your business?
The business is Power Plus Electric here in the area. We're serving the whole Portland and greater Portland area. Commercial, residential.
I'd like to encourage you to continue to attend these meetings. That definitely helps us.
Okay.
And I'd like to encourage you to apply for some of the grants, so.
I'd also like to be able to, do you have any business cards or anything that you can leave with us?
I do.
I'd love to have one.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, Grant.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Charity. You can't talk till you come to the mic, Charity.
I'm actually not Charity. I'm going to read Charity's statement.
Oh, Charity's gone.
But we're, there's a small group of us that are a little bit coordinated. Would it be okay if we
Sure,
come and each gave
sure, absolutely.
Please.
our-
Good.
you can-
Absolutely. And identify yourselves, those of you come who are coordinated. So we've got Mark. Is that Mark Matthews?
Yes.
Great. Is there a Charity?
So Charity's not here. I'm going to
So
read a
it's not
statement
Charity?
from
Okay.
Charity.
So who else? Who else do we have?
I'm Gretchen Hollins, and I also
Gretchen? Okay,
have
so-
a statement from James Matoir.
Okay, well, you know what I'm going to do. There's 3 of you. You'll get 6 minutes.
Okay.
We need
All right. Boom.
we start. Okay, so thanks for having us here today and letting us talk. I'm representing today PBDG, which is Professional Development Group, and we have about 30 contractors here, and now hearing about this issue you guys have in this part of Portland, we have a lot of minority contractors, and our organization really could use your help by incorporating what you guys are going to spend money on to use it for our contractors to help spend the money. We also partnered with Gill, HP Gill, and we brought them along as a collaboration with us, and they'll be talking to you today about what they can do to help also the organization. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, real briefly, we'll try to organize this here. My name is Chris Gruba, actually. And I am a contractor. My company is called Good Energy Retrofit. I do energy efficiency work. I've done a lot of work for a lot of the Clean Energy Works projects. Did a lot of work with the COLI weatherization program. So I've had an amazing opportunity to watch programs that really skip over a large swath of our population, that only serve middle and upper income households. And there's a lot of good work that we can be doing, and we've got some we have formed a coalition together, and we've got some great ideas on some ways to have really effective impact on housing affordability for folks by lowering their utility costs, possibly doing some critical repair work on their homes, possibly seismic retrofits, helping people actually protect their assets. The only people in the city of Portland who are doing seismic work are wealthy families, and et cetera. So we've got some great ideas that we would love to be able to talk to you about further. We also are, our coalition is small businesses, diverse businesses, small nonprofits, and one of the organizations that we pulled into our coalition together is the Community Energy Project, and that's the organization that Charity runs. That is the organization that used to be situated here in Interstate over on Alberta. Their 40-year anniversary, and they are serving the low-income African-American households in Interstate with very, very limited budgets. We think we can actually put together some ideas where we can deploy some funds quickly, high impact, hitting very low-income African-American households. We've got access, we've already got relationships with those families, and so that's what we're talking about. And Gretchen,
I'm Gretchen Hollins. I'm the executive director of the Home Performance Guild. Our contractors have advanced certifications like building performance certification, and they address the home as a whole. And so a benefit of a weatherization project like insulating your attic is wonderful, but if you don't do air sealing and your kids have asthma, you're going to miss the health benefits that go along with that. So our contractors have the knowledge and experience working in projects like Cully and working with the Clean Energy Works project. They have the knowledge and experience to do those weatherization jobs to the biggest benefit to make your house warm, safe, and dry. And by also reducing energy bills, that addresses the displacement and makes your home more affordable. And by partnering with Mark Matthews and the Professional Business Development Group and those contractors, that would expand our contractor base so that we would be able to do critical repairs, because you can't insulate an attic if you've got a leaky roof. And the current programs don't provide enough money to look at the whole house and really keep people in their homes, and that's what we're hoping to do. I wanted to give you a little statement from James Matoir. His grandmother passed away, and he needed to be with family. But I want to give you some of his references. He owns a minority-owned business. He's a certified. James is just so amazing. He's also the vice president of the Home Performance Guild. He's been a technical field consultant at Earth Advantage. He's done professional whole house air sealing. He has worked as a quality assurance inspector, a project manager, a duct sealing technician. He is a home energy rating systems rater, and he is a teacher at PCC. He works with kids at Constructing Hope. He's just phenomenal, and I wish he were here to speak for himself. But he would be an example of the type of contractors with the highly experienced and diverse PBDG contractors that we're partnering with that would really like to have a high impact at these homes that Community Energy Project has already identified, and they just don't have the money to hit those homes like we really want to take care of those homes.
Get this to stop. No, thank you. It's great information. Let me encourage you also. There are two people for the Portland Housing Bureau sitting in the back, and I think they would be key contacts. Shannon Callahan, who is the director of Portland Housing Bureau, and Leslie Goodlow, who is the
Do you guys have any questions?
We, just a couple.
Yeah.
Would you guys?
Before you take off.
Can we
before you
take a
off,
few
before you-
yeah,
before
Thank
leave.
you.
questions?
But I think that they would be also the key individuals to connect with
He has only got
for
6 minutes.
housing consequences. So, yes.
Sorry.
I'll start. I just really appreciate you also mentioning jobs. That's something that's really important to this committee, particularly getting minority tradesmen to work. And so if you don't mind, maybe enlighten us a little bit about the amount of employees that you have. How many are you looking to expand potentially if you're able to grow in the way that you would like to? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so the Home Performance Guild currently has about 15 contractor members, so we're a small organization. And we would definitely want to at least triple that in the next 2 to 3 years. We think that partnering with programs like Constructing Hope, Portland Youth Builders, Metro has a program, it's a career pathway. We need to get more students involved in apprenticeships and mentorships for contractors that maybe don't do weatherization. It's a pretty low entry point, and so kids can have a lot of success doing an attic installation or a replacement of a water heater, and that might encourage them to go on and build their skill set and become a qualified electrician, become a plumber. So we see our role as very much a development role, and so we're hoping to do more of that.
And we have contractors ready now to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to have the funds available to do so.
How many contractors?
We have between 30 and 35 contractors, not just contractors, but subcontractors and also, how do you say it?
General?
No, we're general contractors, subcontractors, and then
Professional services.
A&E, so I don't know how you explain that, but. Well, I'm just saying funds that would be contributed to help building back Portland. You know, just had this case study just was done, and how everybody's been displaced. And I think if we had something that we could go after to redo these houses that's run down to help build back up Portland, the minority neighborhood contractors for it.
Yeah.
I'd like to just ask a question, and Mark, I think that Mark's one of the, as far as African-American contractors, one of the largest, and one of the ones that I know takes care of his people and really looks at giving back to the community. So, and I know that the Guild's working with Mark, and so that for me, that just as a contractor and a competitor of Mark, I would sit there and say he is, top notch. And so I'm excited to see him here today. And the other thing I'd say is I know that he gives back to the community and works with other smaller contractors. And so how we looked, we just saw a report that showed that we're at 1965 levels for African American homeowners. We should all be ashamed of that. Every agency in the city should be ashamed at that number. How do we change that number? And so I think that, it's just trying to figure out ways, whether it's businesses, whether it's home ownership, working with that. And I know that PHB has their programs as well, but I think that it is also our job here to try to figure out how we can best support African Americans within the URA that we're charged to do, and I think that this is good news. We haven't had someone come up with an opportunity to say, we want to try to fix the problem. We've been talking about the problem, but I think this is the first that said, we want to come to fix the problem. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're implementers. We get stuff done. We're not programs. We don't sit behind desks. We can actually deploy, make things happen.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
John. You will be back a little later in.
Thank you, but I just couldn't help myself on this one.
Yeah, you got 2 minutes.
Woo, boy, I'm sitting here still vibrating. I don't know about any of y'all. Tyler bumped y'all, didn't he? He bumped me. I don't know about what y'all thinking and feeling, but I'm sitting with a knot in my stomach. And the last time I sat here before y'all, I talked a little bit about the sense of urgency. Now, y'all got the sense of urgency now. You know, Jennifer asked, she made some real serious points that I was real clear about. One was delusion, and the other one was diluting what we call minority, okay? Meaning that from civil rights to diversity to equity. Okay, everybody's on the platform now. Okay, but the only ones that's not getting off of that platform is African Americans. Okay, so we're real clear about that. Okay, and the other one is trajectory on annual income, household income. I don't know about y'all, but I done read some serious studies. And some of the studies indicate by the years of 2058 that the annual income of the average black household will be 0. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I come here to do some work, okay? And I come here to be serious about it. It took a special set of circumstances to get us here, and it's gonna take a special set of circumstances to get us beyond here. And y'all are in task with some serious business. But one of the things I really respect about y'all, because it was said to me a long time ago about the folks over here in the Northeast, is that most of the folks over here in the Northeast will go down to the politics downtown and will display an emotional appeal. But most of them say that we didn't want y'all emotions, we just wanted a plan, okay? So what I admired and appreciate y'all doing is getting all the facts and the information, okay? But y'all done got the facts, but a lot of us already knew what them facts where they was pointing to in the beginning. So I just want to reinforce in y'all the one thing is about this sense of urgency. I'm serious about this, y'all, because you know what? I don't know about y'all. I've been around here long enough to see my sense of demise coming. And if y'all don't see that coming, I'm sorry. I'm here to remind y'all that it's on its way. If we don't divert the traffic, understand, we won't exist.
Thanks.
Okay, so anyway, I appreciate that, but I'm sorry. I just couldn't sit there with that no more in my stomach. I had to leave it with y'all.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments for John?
Yes, I have a comment for John. I never get tired of pressure and of being reminded of how important the work is. So thank you for that. Is there anything that's on the top of your mind in terms of the work that needs to be done either by this committee, by this city, or by anybody else that you can think of?
Yes, rapid pathways, meaning let's cut the bull crap in terms of process, okay? Because the new Jim Crow is about hurry up and wait, okay? Let's talk about it. Let's agitate about it. Let's emote. But there's something that occurred that I saw in my district that has really annoyed me. And one of those things is looking at Williams. I remember 25 years ago, when I looked at this street right here, there was enough African-American businesses on it to do some things. I'd come from a rural area. I wanted to find black people. I'd come into the Northeast, right? But now that I'm living and working here, you know, it's a different era. But what I saw in the last 3 years happen to Williams, that they literally drove a wedge through our community in 3 years. They created stores, they put over 1,000 feet on the streets, and 25 businesses, new businesses up on Williams between Fremont and Alberta. It took them 3 years. We fought 50 years almost to find and sustain businesses in our district, just a couple of them. And it took them 3 years to put a whole new community in here. So I know the work can be done. I know we can make the changes, but what's keeping it from happening? And to me, it's just a bunch of conversation that's keeping it from. And so we need to create pathways and products that are rapid fire, rapid sequential, to get it from inception to out to the receiver of the content. So that's just my thought about how that should look.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Before I sit down, because I don't want to get back up.
You'll come back up later. You'll come back later.
Thank you so much for what you brought to the table.
Thank you.
We appreciate everyone being here tonight. Thank you so much. Any closing comments from our co-chairs?
No, just thanks everyone for coming. The more community voices that we hear, the better informed we are, and we're here to do the work.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, that's exactly what we're about to do. We're about to go into a closed session and do some executive work. So thank you so much for being here. We'll give you some moments to transition. We'll take a break for a few minutes. Or if anybody needs to grab another bite or something else, please do so. We'll take about 7 minutes and we'll be right back.